Greek nouns come in three varieties. These varieties are called declensions, and if you studied any Latin, you probably recognize them. Latin has 5, whereas Greek only has 3. The 3 sort of run parallel to the Latin ones because the languages are both Indo-European and developed in the same area around the same time. Like their Latin counterparts, Greek's first declension is mostly associated with the eta or alpha sound. The vast majority of these nouns are feminine, like gnome. The second declension is associated with the omicron, and so it will often be called the omicron declension as well. The vast majority of these nouns are masculine or neuter. An example is anthropos. And the third declension can have a noun in any gender, and we call it the consonant declension because its nominative singular often ends in an irregular, unpredictable consonant sound. Words like charis for favor. Today I want to focus on the first declension, of which there are 4 kinds. The first is the most common, in which the nominative singular ends in eta, like psuche. The second is what I call the ear rule, which is a stem that ends in epsilon iota or rho, and will have an alpha in the nominative singular, like sumphora does here. The third kind has an alpha that's always short, and it's just worth memorizing because they're not very common. But the words in which they do occur, it's worth remembering that they're there. That's a word like hamaxa, hamaxes. The masculine nouns ending in ace are very similar to the masculine nouns in Latin, in that they tend to describe the jobs that men would do in the ancient world. Something like stratiotes, which is a soldier, and they'll take the masculine article. Just as a reminder, when we memorize a noun in Greek, we memorize 4 pieces of information. We memorize the nominative singular, the genitive singular, the article, which tells us what gender we're dealing with, as well as at least one definition for the word. The key to everything, though, is really memorizing the genitive singular correctly. What does the genitive singular tell us? Well, really 2 things. It helps us find the stem, and it helps us see the declension of the noun, in this case identifying it as the first declension. So let's take each of our example nouns and find the stem. For psuches, we just knock off the genitive ending, and we get psuch. For sumphoras, we knock off the as and get sumphor. For hamaxes, hamax, and for stratiotes, stratiot. You'll notice that I left the accent where it was, and if you watch the video on accent rules, you'll see that nouns have persistent accent, which is to say their accent tries to stay where it's placed in the nominative singular, unless it's moved by some other rule of accentuation. So you're in pretty good company just leaving the accent where it is when you find the stem. There is good news before we look at the endings individually. The plural endings are the same for all 4 kinds of nouns. Furthermore, the genitive plural will always be accented with a circumflex over the omega. Both of those things are good to keep in mind when you're trying to commit 4 different kinds of something to memory. The first declension is admittedly a little bit easier in Latin, but let's take a look at each of the 4 kinds individually. In the eta variety, you really have the plain vanilla, follow the rule kind of noun. Eta in the singular, alpha in the plural. In general, that's what the nouns try to do. But in the ear rule, we have a pattern that we can recognize where it's alpha throughout. Alpha in the singular, alpha in the plural. No exceptions. It's the last 2 that are the strange ones. The short alpha kind that we just memorized because they give us an alpha in the nominative singular will have an alpha in the nominative, accusative, and vocative singulars, but an eta in the genitive and dative singulars. Again, the plurals are all the same, so we can rest easy there. The masculine nouns of the first declension have a very strange nominative and genitive singular ending, but really their other endings are fairly logical. So it's nice that once we have the dictionary entry committed to memory, We have almost everything we need for a masculine noun in the first declension. The only other sort of strange thing that I would like to point out is this short alpha in the vocative, which is going to throw a few people and does actually change the accent as well. But once you know that the ace and the oo are really the only distinctive or strange endings about the masculine nouns of the first declension, you're set to go on the first declension and you know everything you need to recognize it in the wild.